This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello, I'm Phil McKinney. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that we are taking a few weeks away from the studio to work on a whole new batch of shows. In the meantime, we are reaching back into the 14-year archive and bringing you some of our most popular shows from the past. Enjoy. So why is some organizations more successful at innovation than others? Some just knock it out of the park while others struggle. Over the years, I've collected up a set of what I call the laws of innovation. Now, I wrote about this in a blog post back last fall, but what I want to do is take this podcast and go into a little bit of more detail to give you the background and more specifics about each of these laws and what I was thinking when I pulled this together. Now, I will readily admit that I pulled this list together, again, as a collection of companies that I've seen as being highly successful and those organizations that have struggled. Now, no single organization will be able to be successful in all of these laws, right? There's always opportunities to improve. There's always opportunities to do better. So, let's get started. Law number one is what I call the law of leadership. Now, why did I put this as the first law? One is that leadership sets the tone within an organization. Leadership needs to be out there in front and not just giving lip service to innovation. One of the things I've started collecting most recently are annual reports from public companies and counting how many times the CEO uses the word innovation in the opening letter in the annual report. It's amazing how that word now is being used and bantered about basically as a way to either convey something that the organization isn't doing, or it's just simply what I refer to as buzzword bingo. You need to have the word in that annual report, otherwise shareholders are going to be upset. There's a difference between acting as an innovation leader and being an innovation leader. In this case, from a standpoint of leadership, it includes the board, the CEO, and his or her direct reports. And it's not about just talking about it, it's about walking the talk. One question I recently asked a group of CEOs of mid-cap companies was how much time do they spend not just talking about innovation, but actually doing innovation, engaged with their innovation teams, thinking about innovations for their business. And I said, if you're not spending at least 10% of your time working on innovation, then you're not serious about it. And that does not account you off talking to your board or making presentations to your board of directors. If you're a leader within the organization, you need to commit at least 10% of your time thinking about innovation. Now, if you're within an organization and you're not the CEO, how much time does your CEO spend thinking about innovation? Are they really engaged and really involved, or is it just, some review process that they go through? If innovation's the core, the CEO set the tone. And if the CEO is serious about innovation, if the board is serious about innovation, if the senior executives are serious about innovation, then they're out leading from the front. They're walking the talk. And those are the organizations that are going to be wildly successful. Law number two is the law of culture. Now, one of the things I learned over my career, and I wish I had learned it earlier in my career, was the importance of culture as regards to innovation. I have a saying that I've put together now that it's become pretty much a mantra for me, and that is, culture eats strategy for lunch. And I'm serious. What I have found out over my years of frustrations of trying to get large organizations to change direction, to adapt, to innovate, is you got to deal with the culture first. You've got to inject and create a culture of innovation in order to support a strategy of innovation. Now, there's lots of components that come into play when you think about culture. It includes people. People need to feel ownership of the innovation agenda. They need to be equipped. They need to be skilled. This takes time. It's not all of a sudden you read a book on the weekend and you come in on Monday and you go, okay, we're now an innovation culture. It takes time. You have to equip them. People have to feel like they're prepared. The culture also has to value ideas. Ideas need to be actively solicited, not only from inside but outside, and they need to be valued and they need to be nurtured, not criticized. People need to be rewarded for submitting ideas. They need to be rewarded for submitting ideas that have huge impact. Those need to be the new leaders, not just the person who goes out and bags the big sales deal, but you need to elevate and reward the people who are coming up with those big ideas that transform the organization. Another component of culture is alignment. All the resources need to be aligned. If you got one part of the organization that has a culture of, bag them and tag them, go close the deal, and you've got another part of the organization which is, all politicized as to promotionability, and a third part of your organization whose priorities and culture is about teamwork, guess what? That organization is non-functional. All of that needs to be aligned. Resources need to be aligned with objectives, needs to be aligned with strategy that's aligned with the culture. If any of those are out of alignment, the organization has become highly inefficient. And one of the other areas of culture is communication. Communication needs to be clear. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be, pulling these all of the members of the organization in from the standpoint of their value, their role, and how what you're doing aligns with the underlying culture and objectives of the organization. So again, culture. This is one area that I'd wish I'd spent more time on earlier in my career. I'm a late learner in this one, but I am a firm believer that if you're going to have a highly effective innovation organization, you need to have a culture of innovation established. And you need to start working on the culture first before you even think about your innovation strategy. So again, well, culture eats strategy for lunch. Focus on the culture. Third law is the law of resources. Resources for me include people, money, time, equipment. And the problem with most organizations is that they will allocate resources to innovation, but they don't protect it, right? We'll fund it with time and with people and get going, but they don't protect it, meaning it's the resource that says, if we have a tough quarter, I'm going to go in and shut down that program, or we're not going to fund it as much, or we're going to turn off the procurement system at the end of the quarter to stop any spending to help boost the numbers going into the quarterly results, all those kinds of things, right? If you're truly serious about innovation, you get the discipline of allocating those resources and then protecting them, not allowing those resources to be manipulated, used, abused, stopped. Resources that are allocated to innovation need to be protected, and they need to be given, autonomy to be able to go off and execute, and not part of the thrashing within the organization. And this, in case, is very difficult for a lot of executives, right? Because you're asking executives to literally have a split personality. Innovation, you allocate those resources hands off. Other resources, you're constantly manipulating to align them with the short-term objectives. But you need to figure out that alignment, and you need to have that discipline that, yes, executives need to have that kind of split personality of long-range view, long-range investment, long-range commitment of resources with meeting short-term objectives and the short-term quarterly results. And real top innovation leaders are able to do both. The fourth law is the law of patience. This is probably the one law that most organizations struggle with the most. Patience is critical for innovation. Innovation doesn't happen fast. It takes time. Get used to it. This is a challenge for organizations. It falls into kind of what I refer to as the rule of 18. And the rule of 18 is where you come up with a very exciting program. Management gets excited. They find some dollars in the current budget to kind of get the idea going. That's great. You go to the next billing or budget cycle. In the next budget cycle, people are still excited about it. So that item or that project is put into the budget for the next year. Now you get to the second full budget cycle. If that project hasn't delivered or isn't seen as being able to have some near-term impact, going into that second budget cycle, it's at risk of being killed. It's what I call the rule of 18. You can go back, and particularly large organizations, go back and look and see where these projects kind of hit that 14, 16, 18, 20 month kind of window where they're going to come into the second budget cycle and all of a sudden they're getting killed. So the way to get around some of these things is you got to plan and allocate those resources such that you can actually deliver things sooner rather than later. But the burden really needs to fall on management. Management needs to have patience. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. They need to have patience when it comes to innovations. It's not about just driving to the quarterly results. Some innovations will take 2, 3, 5, 10, and in some cases even 20 years. Right? The one example I always like to use is David Packard when HP decided to go into the computer business. David actually wasn't even in support of that strategy. He didn't believe HP could win. But being convinced by his senior leaders, David committed the organization to going into the computer industry. But not just to go into the computer industry, but to become number one. David Packard issued a memo to the HP employees saying that HP was committing to the computer industry and that the entire organization was committing to become the number one PC and computer manufacturer in 20 years. Interestingly enough, HP became number one in year 17. It's those kinds of long-term commitments, resources, patience in particular, that says this is not a 1-year bet or a 2-year bet, but in this case, this is going to be a 20-year bet in order to become the leader in that segment. Does your organization have the discipline to have that kind of patience? Maybe not, but at least do they have the commitment that says it's going to take 3 to 4 years to be committed to be the number one or to become the leader within a segment that you're going after. Law of patience. Organizations need to be patient when it comes to driving these innovation changes. The fifth law is the law of process. Process is important. Innovation is not just a serendipity thing. You don't slip on the bar of soap, bang your head, and eureka. There is a process. There is a flow. You need to create a process. Now, you can take somebody else's process and apply it, but what I encourage organizations to do is to go talk to the best people out there who are driving innovation programs in large organizations or even small organizations, learn how they do it, rip off the best ideas, and apply it to your organization. You need to adapt and adopt. You need to adapt the processes so it fits within your culture, your management style, your leadership style, your industry segment, your competitive positioning. All those variables need to have an influence on what is the right process that you're going to use. But you need to establish a process. Now, the process needs to cover the full innovation chain, everything from how do you capture ideas to how do you generate more and better ideas to how do you identify the best ideas to how do you actually execute those ideas. If you've been a listener to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I propose a process called FIRE: focus, ideation, ranking, and execution. Focus. Where are you searching? Where's the best areas to search for innovations within your particular problem space, your industry, etc. Ideation. How do you capture ideas? How do you generate ideas? What's a better approach to coming up with more better ideas? Ranking. How do you go through the big pool of ideas you have and select the best ideas? And then execution. How do you actually translate an idea into a real innovation that delivers value in the marketplace? You need to have a process. If you don't have a process, create one. If you've got a process, improve upon it. Never let your innovation process become stagnant. If you're using the exact same process year after year after year, that in effect becomes a blinder, becomes a constraint. So not only do you need a process, but you also need the discipline to constantly innovate your innovation process. The sixth law is the law of the BHAG. Now, what do I mean by a BHAG? BHAG is bold, hairy, audacious goal. This is setting the bar out there that strives your team to achieve and do things never done before. And that's really the whole objective of innovation. It's not about doing the same thing your competitors are doing or doing it the same way you've always done it. By setting out that BHAG, you're forcing the team to reach beyond anything that was even possible. BHAGs have some unique characteristics. One is that they are very clear and concise in what the target is. We're going to go solve coming up with a drug that's going to solve, cure cancer, or it's a device that's going to be, half as, thick as the competitor's products. Very clear goals. So that way the team can rally. They know what the objective is, and they get that sense of satisfaction when they cross the goal line. It also needs to be a stretch, right? It needs to be something that's going to be far enough out there. Now, as a leader, you need to be careful with the BHAG. A lot of times people will set these, audacious goals out there, but not only do they set the goal, but they then dictate to the team how to get there. And that's the mistake. Leaders do not dictate how. Think back to John F. Kennedy, right? Kennedy didn't design the rockets that got the U.S. to the moon. He just simply set the BHAG to put man on the moon, and he let the teams innovate the process of how do you get that to put the man on the moon. So be careful. Set the BHAG as the target objective. Do not dictate how. Let the process of innovation within your organization define the how. And the seventh law is the law of execution. Now, execution is that task of going from idea all the way through and ultimately putting a product, a service, experience, whatever it is, out there for your customers to buy, enjoy, benefit from, however they will, engage with whatever you're offering. Ideas without execution are a hobby. And I'm not in the hobby business. The whole purpose of innovation, the whole definition of innovation, is the translation of idea to impact. And so you need to drive and you need to have a consistent approach, an aggressive approach to execution. Having lots of ideas and having the fun of brainstorming sessions and eating lots of pizza, fun, great, everybody gets all charged up, but the value is zero. There's no value, no success until you take that idea and actually deliver something that's of value. Now, what I would encourage is for you to think about segmenting the execution into phases. Put a little bit of money in, prove out the idea, put a little bit more money in, prove out more of the idea. Very much of a venture kind of a model rather than, we need, $400 million to go do X into the marketplace. By allocating and segmenting out the execution phases, one is that you can kill projects early that are not going to make it, that just aren't successful. And that's not a bad thing. Not all ideas are going to be successful. The other is it allows you to reduce your risk. You learn early, learn fast, fail fast. If the ideas aren't going to work out, you kill it. You've only put in a little bit of money. You haven't committed the entire budget and the entire organization for ultimately be successful. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Keep in mind, the objective for execution is to execute, not to talk about execution and not to put out pretty Gantt charts and that. It's to actually execute. So in review, again, the 7 laws for innovation are the law of leadership, the law of culture, the law of resources, the law of patience, the law of process, the law of the BHAG, and the law of execution. As I said in the beginning, not all organizations are going to be in a position to be successful across all of these laws. What I would suggest you do as kind of a next step is think about each of these laws and go into your organization and rank yourself. How good are you? Right? And just do a score from 0 to 10. And maybe it's just not your score. Maybe you have, a bunch of different executives and different employees within the organization listen to this podcast or read the blog post from last fall, and then have them go through and score their organization on a 0 to 10. How good are you in each of these areas? The organizations and parts of the laws that you're struggling with, that gives you an area of focus. Do you need to be more conscious, for instance, on patience? Or do you need to be more conscious on the issue of culture and how you're going to adapt the culture to be more innovative? Right? So in addition to doing your innovations and coming up with ideas, you need to take a look at these 7 areas within your organization and be honest, be brutally, truthfully honest with yourself and say, where is it we are today? How good are we? And where is it that we can improve? Because there's always areas and opportunities for improvement. And by simply focusing on these areas, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of 90% of the people out there. Just by spending time thinking on this and constantly improving in these areas, you will be better equipped to take advantage of the ideas you do generate, which will put you way ahead of your competitors. So good luck, take a whack at it, and drop me an email if I can answer any questions you might have on how to take a look at these things within your organizations. This week, we are reaching deep into the archive and bringing you one of our most downloaded shows. Enjoy. You notice that the market is being flooded with a new type of consultant? People who are branding themselves innovation consultants. Now, many of these innovation consultants are doing great work. They're helping clients and becoming more innovative. However, I've run across some who have never done it. They've never been in the innovation game. They've never have led a team or have actually come up with an idea and seen it all the way through themselves. That's kind of like someone trying to teach a pilot to fly who's never flown themselves. Or worse, someone who's trying to teach a surgeon how to do surgery, yet never has performed surgery themselves. It makes no sense. Now, I spent many years in the management consulting space when I ran the consulting practice at Computer Sciences Corporation back in the early 90s. Now, consultants who have true experts, who really understand the space, who typically have come out of that industry and then become consultants, they provide a much-needed service. Now, my advice to organizations, though, is treat consultants with a little bit of caution. Consultants should be just one of many inputs into the decision-making process. We've all been part of those organizations where, for some reason, the senior leaders, the CEOs, and the board put more weight into these outside consultants, particularly some of the big-name management consulting firms. For some reason, whatever they say goes. And management will just fall right behind because they use it as a CYA move. If the strategy fails or the organization gets into trouble, the CEO and the board can simply say, hey, we brought in the world's experts. They told us this was a good strategy to go, so don't hold us accountable. We use these outside experts. It's basically a way to have a scapegoat should something go wrong. Organizations need to take that ownership of whatever it is they're doing, and consultants, again, are just one input into the decision-making process. And when you take that consultant's input, understand the level of expertise that went into the recommendation. Not all consultants are created equal. We can all point to a lot of companies who got bad advice from consultants. They went off and did something based on that advice, and it totally blew up in their face. So be careful. Bad advice can come from anywhere, It can come from consultants. It can also come from inside your organization. And with that said, another piece of advice that I would give organizations is don't discount your inside experts. Organizations tend to put more weight into these outside consultants than the inside experts that you already have within your organization. You may have the person who's got that right input, that right perspective. Your challenge is finding them, or if you are that person, making senior management aware of your opinions. And this is just one of the challenges of being one of those insiders is how do you get yourself visibility such that senior leaders know that you have that opinion? And be bold. Don't just sit on the sidelines and wring your hands and say, well, management's off doing something stupid. Step up, state your opinion, and if they don't listen to you, at least you gave them your view, your perspective. Now, back to the consultant piece. If you're out there hiring consultants, and this applies to whether it's an innovation consultant or a technology consultant or whatever role, there's 5 questions you should ask every consultant when you're talking to them. Now, I'm going to frame this in the context of an innovation consultant, but you can adapt these 5 questions to any type of a consultant that you're looking to hire. The first question, what innovations have you come up with and delivered to the market? The emphasis is on you. Not advise the consultant, not sat on the sidelines and had a little piece. What innovations have you come up with and delivered to the market? This question is designed to weed out the people who teach versus the people who do. If the consultant says, well, I actually haven't done it, but I've been advising, and they list a long list of clients, turn around and run. You want people who've actually been in the trenches, have the scars, have gone through the struggles. That's the expertise that you want. Second question, what approach did you use? What approach did you use to come up and drive that innovation? How did you deliver that to the marketplace? Why did you use that approach? What's the benefits versus using other approaches? How many other firms are using your approach that you worked out and came up with? And when was the last time you innovated the approach? That last part of that question is important. There's a lot of philosophy that says once you've developed your innovation approach, to then simply just, lock it down and continue and just use that repeatedly. My view is you need to continue to innovate. You need to innovate the approach. So again, question 2, what approach did you use? And with that, some follow-up part of that question is why? What benefits versus other approaches? How many other firms are using that approach? And when was the last time you innovated the approach? If they say, well, we don't innovate the approach, we've got it, it's perfect, you follow our 12-step process and magic happens, turn around and run the other way. Third question, what were the lessons learned, right? When you drove these other innovation programs, what were the lessons learned? What would you do differently if you had to do it over again, right? There's always lessons learned. Innovation never comes out as originally planned. You're always going to have struggles, failures, problems that you're going to have to, on the spot, figure out and adjust. So what were the lessons learned? Question 4, what innovations are you working on now? If an innovation consultant says, well, 10 years ago I did this great product or this great innovation and now I've been out teaching and they're not doing any innovation, meaning they're not keeping their own skill set up, it's kind of like going to the gym and you hire this trainer, and this trainer was actually, a big health nut 25 years ago. And over the last 25 years, they don't do any exercises. They're overweight and yet they're going to be your trainer? I don't think so. Same thing with innovation. What innovations are you working on now? How are they staying sharp in the context of what is it that they're working on? And then the last question, which kind of ties into that, is how is the consultant personally staying innovative? What are they doing on a daily, weekly, monthly effort to keep themselves sharp on innovations? Are they doing daily exercises of coming up with, 25 ideas to solve a particular problem? What is it that they're personally staying sharp? Just as everything else, you got to stay on your game. Otherwise, it quickly goes away. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Again, the 5 questions. What innovations have you come up with and have delivered to the market? Not advised a consultant as a consultant, not that you peripherally maybe were part of a brainstorming session and came up with an idea. What innovations have you come up with, meaning you started from the idea phase and gone all the way through to delivery? If a consultant can't answer that question and answer it sufficiently to you, then walk away. Second question, what approach did you use? How did you go about creating that innovation? Is that an approach that you're using ongoing? When's the last time you updated or innovated the approach? Third question, what were the lessons learned? What would you do differently with that innovation when you took it from idea to market? Fourth, what innovations are you working on now? What do you find interesting? What is it as a consultant are things that you're driving and personally engaged in? What is it that you're passionate about? And the last question is how do you as a consultant personally stay innovative? Now, I've framed these questions specifically for people who are, interviewing innovation consultants that they're looking to hire. Some of you are innovation consultants as listeners to this podcast. How would you honestly answer these 5 questions for yourself? And what is it that you need to be working on to make sure that you can answer these 5 questions sufficiently for your future clients? Now, consultants are a key part of the innovation ecosystem for a number of reasons. One is that there aren't a lot of innovation experts out there. It's short supply, thus why we're seeing this absolute explosion in innovation consultants. So the challenge is companies need access to these expertise, but they can't afford to hire them. So they want to bring them on as a consultant. So, part-time, maybe a week a month or a couple weeks a month or however you bring your consultants on. You need access to it, and this is one way to get to it because you can't hire them because there just aren't enough of them. Expertise needed for a critical phase of a project. Maybe you hire someone who's an innovation consultant who focuses on idea generation and you bring them up early. Or you hire an innovation consultant who focuses on the execution. You bring them at the end of the project. Whatever it is, you're finding these expertise needed for critical phases. And the other is you just need the varied opinions. You want to bring in maybe 1 or 2 different consultants and use that as one, again, of multiple inputs, maybe from your inside team, to take a look at the innovations you're working on to see if they make sense. So consultants are a key part of the ecosystem. They're needed. They're critical. You just want to make sure you're getting good ones, right? Because this is a new space. And you want to make sure that you're getting real expertise and not people who have just read some books and now are off trying to claim themselves as consultants. Make sure you're getting what you need from the real experts. And this applies whether it's innovation consultants or other kinds of consultants. That is, the key for me. These are a critical resource. I've met many of them. Some of them are really, really, really good out there, and I would highly recommend some. Some I've come across and had conversations with who I would say these are people who are just simply taking advantage of a growing demand for expertise and innovation and a lack of supply. So just be careful. Consultants can be helpful. Just make sure you're getting the right expertise that you need. This week, we are reaching deep into the archive and bringing you one of our most downloaded shows. Enjoy. Well, based on the popularity of the last podcast creativity exercise, given the number of comments that were posted in the show notes with the ideas on the ink pen with no ink in it, I'm actually going to try this again. We got another creativity exercise for this week's show. So this creativity tool is what I would call the MacGyver or Apollo 13 method. So for those of you who are probably in the younger generation who don't remember the MacGyver TV show, this is a guy who was a agent for a government who basically could solve any problem, including defusing bombs and saving the world based on a Swiss Army knife, a little bit of string, and bubble gum. He could literally create anything out of what was in his pockets and save the world. Kind of like in line with what happened on Apollo 13, where they had to solve the problem of the explosion on the Apollo and bring the astronauts home safely. And the crew and team back on Earth worked together, pulled out the rabbit out of the hat, and was able to create tools that they could actually build on the spaceship to safely bring them home, where failure was not an option. So in this case, how do you use whatever you have available to you to solve the problem? So with a MacGyver or Apollo 13 method, you're given a problem or an objective, you open up your desk drawer, your purse, your briefcase, or even your pockets. Use only the items you have. Don't cheat and go buy something. You can only use the items you have, and then create as many ideas within 20 minutes. So again, you're given a problem or objective. You open your desk drawer, your purse, your briefcase. You can only use the items you have, and you can create as many ideas within 20 minutes. So for this exercise, you get to work and you realize you forgot to get a gift for a coworker's upcoming wedding. So you were given the task of creating a gift or buying a gift for a coworker's upcoming wedding. You can only use the items in your reach, in your purse, your briefcase, and your desk drawer. Each item must be practical. Each idea that you come up with has to be practical. It can't be artistic. It's got to have a practical use. Each idea must be made from 2 or more items that you have on your desk. So the task is, how many ideas can you come up with in 20 minutes? So again, you get to work and you realize you forgot to get a gift for a coworker's upcoming wedding. You can only use the items within your reach. Each idea must be practical, so you must be able to describe its use. Each idea must be made from 2 or more items. And how many ideas can you come up with 20 minutes? Now I'm going to encourage you again to post your ideas in the show notes. And actually, if you send me photos, I'll post the photos also in the show notes. So if you actually go off and create something at your desk, take a quick snapshot, send them to me at podcast@killerinnovations.com, and I'll post them in the show notes. So again, let's see how many ideas you can come up with to create a practical set of wedding gifts. How many ideas can you come up with whatever you have within arm's reach? And you have 20 minutes to do so. So get going. You are listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.